All right, let's dive into the energy sector, specifically all the changes happening around distribution grids and transformers. We've got a bunch of cool stuff to look at today. Articles from Transformer Technology magazine, interviews from the Doble Client Conference, even some sneak peeks from an upcoming book by an engineer. Should be interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild time to be in the field, that's for sure. So much happening.
I could already tell. One quote that really grabbed me was from Marcus Emmett, the expert in the field. He said, "The long-discussed net zero transition has become one of the dominant labor market trends of the 21st century." What do you think about that?
Oh, that's a really interesting point. It shows how this whole shift is way bigger than just the environment, It's changing entire industries.
Yeah.
Creating all kinds of new jobs. It'll affect everyone's careers in ways we haven't even thought of yet.
Makes you wonder what those new jobs will even look like. Energy analyst Saqib Malik predicts U.S. electricity consumption will jump by 7.5% by 2030. And that's from stuff we use all the time, like electric vehicles and data centers. What's that going to do to our current infrastructure? Can it even handle that?
Well, that's a massive increase. And it's definitely going to put a strain on things, yeah. I mean, a lot of the system is running on old tech. It's just not built for this kind of demand, especially as we try to add in more renewable energy sources.
So are we talking about like a bottleneck? Is that why everyone's pushing for innovation with things like grid modernization?
Exactly. We can't rely on the old way of doing things, that passive distribution grid where power just flows one way.
Right, from the power plant to the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. We need to move to something more active.
So what does that mean? An active system. What would that actually look like?
Think about it. Power flowing in multiple directions.
Yeah.
Homes and businesses with solar panels, generating their own energy, and even selling it back to the grid. That's the whole idea of a smart grid. A network that can intelligently manage everything based on what's happening in real time.
That's pretty cool. But I bet that also makes things a lot harder for the people running the grid, right?
Oh, for sure. Managing that two-way flow with all the ups and downs of solar and wind.
Yeah.
And making sure the whole thing stays stable and reliable. There are definitely some hurdles to overcome.
Definitely. Okay, so we talked about the big picture, this grid modernization thing, but I'm curious about the actual parts that make it all work. Let's zoom in on transformers for a minute. They're super important, I know that much, but honestly, I don't really get what they do.
They're kind of the unsung heroes,
Yeah.
Just quietly doing their job.
Right.
Basically, they regulate the voltage.
Okay.
So they make sure the electricity can travel long distances efficiently.
Yeah.
And then once it gets to your house or business, they make sure it's safe to use.
Oh, okay. So they're kind of like the heart of the whole system, making sure the right amount of power gets where it needs to go.
Yeah.
I was reading JFE Shoji Power Canada's urgent call to action, though, and they're saying a lot of transformers are super old, like decades old, and they're already struggling to replace them fast enough, even without all this new growth.
Oh, yeah, that's a big worry. We might actually run out of transformers, and we need more than ever right now.
Wow.
And it's not just about having enough of them either. They need to be more efficient, too.
Oh, right.
I remember at the Doble Client Conference, there was a lot of talk about new materials like grain-oriented electrical steel, GoES.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that term. What's so special about GoES for transformers?
Well, it's way more efficient than the old kind of electrical steel.
Okay.
So less energy gets lost during transmission, which is a huge deal as we electrify more and more things.
Right, we got to cut down on our carbon footprint.
Exactly.
So we need more transformers, and they need to be better. But if there are all these supply chain issues, how are we going to do that?
It's a tough situation for sure. But there's also a lot of cool innovation happening.
Okay.
Some companies are even trying out amorphous metal, which is even more efficient than GoES.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like we're trying to walk this tightrope, managing all this aging infrastructure, but also pushing for all this new tech. It reminds me of something I heard Santiago Barcon say, the engineer. He said that building this renewable energy future is like building a Gothic cathedral.
Ooh, I like that. Really captures the long-term vision.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of collaboration to pull this off.
For sure. That brings us back to the Doble Client Conference, where they talked a lot about not just adding more renewables, but making sure the grid can actually handle it.
Absolutely. I remember Matt Carrara, the president of Doble, he was saying how slow permitting processes are really holding things back.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then we heard from Martin Robinson, and he was advocating for this monitor, inspect, manage approach. Basically, use technology to make the existing infrastructure more reliable.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can't just focus on the shiny new stuff.
Right. Got to optimize what we already have.
Exactly.
You know what really surprised me, though? Mick Ciccarelli, the guy who manages Doble's lab services. He was talking about this knowledge gap with all of the experienced workers retiring.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like we need new people to step up and learn all this stuff fast.
For sure. The energy sector is changing so quickly, and we need skilled workers at every level.
This has been super fascinating. We've covered a lot, from the big ideas of grid modernization down to the details of transformers and the workforce. So what's next?
Let's dive into some of the specific technologies that are driving this whole transformation, shall we? We'll talk about their potential and also the hurdles we still need to clear. We've talked about the challenges, but let's get into some of the solutions, like how we're actually reshaping the grid.
Okay, yeah. You mentioned smart grids earlier. What actually makes a smart grid smart? Like, what tech are we talking about?
Well, a big one is advanced metering infrastructure, AMI. It's not like those old analog meters.
Yeah.
Smart meters give you real-time data on energy use, and it's all digital.
So instead of just guessing or waiting for the monthly bill, utilities and people at home can see exactly what's going on.
Exactly. It changes everything about how we manage the grid.
How so?
Well, imagine knowing exactly where and when people are using the most energy. You can distribute power way more efficiently. Less waste, less strain on the system.
So it's like having a constant check on the entire grid.
Yeah.
It's got to be super helpful. What other technologies are important for making this work?
Grid automation is another big one. Sensors, intelligent controls, software that can automatically adjust the flow of electricity.
Based on real-time conditions, right?
Exactly.
It sounds crazy complicated.
It is, but let me give you an example. Let's say there's a sudden spike in demand in one neighborhood. Maybe it's a hot day and everyone's blasting their AC.
I've been there.
In the past, that could overload a transformer and boom, blackout. But with grid automation, the system senses that spike and automatically reroutes power from somewhere else that's using less.
So it's like a self-balancing system, constantly adjusting to keep everything running. It seems like data and automation are key here.
You got it. And artificial intelligence is becoming more and more important too. AI can help us make sense of all that data and make automation even smarter.
Right, AI is everywhere these days. How are we using it for smart grids specifically?
Oh, all sorts of ways. Predictive maintenance, load forecasting. For example, AI can analyze past data and weather patterns to predict when and where demand will be highest.
Wow.
So utilities can plan ahead and adjust their operations before anything goes wrong.
So instead of reacting to problems, they can prevent them. That's huge for reliability.
It is. It also opens up new possibilities like dynamic pricing.
Dynamic pricing, what's that?
Basically, the cost of electricity changes based on supply and demand at any given moment.
Oh, interesting. So how would that work for me as a consumer?
Imagine getting a notification that electricity will be cheaper in a few hours because solar power is peaking. You could run your dishwasher then, or charge your EV.
Oh, so you get a discount for using energy at certain times.
Exactly. Saves you money and helps balance the grid.
I like that. Makes things more interactive.
It does. And it encourages people to use energy storage too, which is another big piece of the smart grid puzzle.
Energy storage. Yeah, everyone's talking about batteries these days. What's their role in all of this?
They're essential for dealing with the ups and downs of renewable energy.
Right, because the sun isn't always shining and the wind isn't always blowing.
Exactly. We need a way to store that energy when it's abundant and use it later when we need it.
So are we talking about, like, giant battery farms?
Large-scale storage is part of it, yeah. But there are also smaller solutions, like home batteries that store energy from rooftop solar panels.
So even homeowners can play a role in grid stability.
Exactly, by storing energy and releasing it back to the grid when needed.
And there are other energy storage technologies in the works too, right?
Oh yeah, things like flow batteries and compressed air energy storage. It's a pretty exciting field.
There's a lot going on here. It's amazing to see all these different technologies coming together to make our energy system more sustainable and resilient.
It's really cool to see it all happening.
It is. But all this innovation must come with a price tag, right?
Yeah.
Who's paying for all of this modernization?
It's a mix of public and private investment. Governments are offering incentives and subsidies to encourage the adoption of renewable energy and smart grid tech.
So it's a team effort.
It has to be. Policymakers, utilities, the private sector, everyone working together.
And consumers are part of it too,
Right.
by choosing cleaner and more efficient solutions.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about how all these advancements benefit the utilities and the grid. But what about me, the person paying the electricity bill? How does this affect my wallet?
That's the million-dollar question. And there isn't always a simple answer.
Yeah.
Some things, like more efficient transformers, will lead to lower costs in the long run.
Makes sense.
But there are upfront costs, too, for upgrading infrastructure and implementing new tech.
So it's a balance between short-term costs and long-term savings.
Exactly.
Are there any ways for people to take advantage of all this and maybe save some money now?
Absolutely. One example is time of use pricing,
Okay.
where the price of electricity changes depending on the time of day.
Oh, right. I've heard of that.
You can shift your energy use to off-peak hours when demand is lower and rates are cheaper.
So like doing laundry late at night or charging my EV during the day when there's lots of solar power?
Exactly. It rewards people for using energy strategically, which helps their wallet and the grid.
That's really cool. Okay, so it's not all sunshine and roses, right? There must be some challenges and downsides to all of this.
Yeah.
No tech is perfect. What are some of the things we need to be careful about?
One of the biggest concerns is data security.
Oh, right. With all this information flying around, how do we keep the smart grid safe from hackers?
It's definitely a top priority.
Yeah.
Utilities and tech providers are working hard to build in strong cybersecurity measures.
To protect the grid from anyone who wants to disrupt it or steal data.
Exactly.
Data privacy is another thing that worries me. If smart meters are tracking my energy use in real time, couldn't that information be misused?
It's a valid concern. We need clear rules and safeguards in place to protect people's privacy. Utilities have to be transparent about how they collect, store, and use data, and people should have control over their own information.
So it's about finding the right balance.
Yeah.
Between innovation and responsibility.
Right. We've covered a lot of technical stuff, but let's not forget about the people involved.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, all of this tech is about people. The workers who build and maintain these systems, and the consumers who use them.
Speaking of workers, you know how Nick Ciccarelli was talking about that knowledge gap with all the retirements?
Yeah.
What kind of skills are we going to need as the energy sector keeps changing?
That's a great question, and it's a perfect segue into the last part of our deep dive.
Okay, we'll look at the specific careers that are emerging, the skills you'll need to thrive in this new world, and how you can become a part of this exciting transformation.
So we've talked about all these changes in the energy sector, the challenges, the cool new tech. But what does it all mean for me, for the listener?
This is where it gets really interesting. We've seen that the energy sector isn't some niche thing anymore. It's like the backbone of the whole economy.
So we're not just talking about like power plants and linemen anymore.
Not even close. Think software, data analysis, cybersecurity, policy, even communications. Pretty much every field you can imagine is connected to energy now.
Wow. So what kinds of jobs are we talking about? What does this new energy world actually look like for someone looking for a career?
Well, on the technical side, we'll always need electricians, technicians, engineers, the people who build and maintain the grid.
So those traditional jobs are still in demand.
Oh yeah, more than ever. But there's also a huge need for people who know software development, data analytics, cybersecurity.
So it's like a mix of the old school hands-on skills and this new high-tech stuff.
Yeah, exactly. We need people who can build the physical systems and people who can write the code, analyze the data, protect everything from hackers.
Takes brains and brawn.
For sure. And don't forget about the non-technical roles, too.
Oh, right. Like what?
Well, think about policy and regulations. We need people who understand how energy markets work.
Okay.
People who can deal with the government, advocate for clean energy policy.
The lawyers, lobbyists, analysts, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And as the energy sector becomes more focused on the everyday consumer, we'll need people who can communicate well, marketers who can explain all this new tech, help people understand energy efficiency, and build trust in the system.
It's like everyone has a place at the table now.
That's what's so cool about it. No matter what your background is, what you're interested in, there's a way to get involved in energy.
Okay, so let's say I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, hey, this sounds cool. I want to be a part of this. Where do I even start?
You know, there are so many resources out there. Online courses, certifications, professional groups, networking events. Just Google it. You'll find tons of stuff.
So be proactive, do your research.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of talking to people. Reach out to people who already work in energy, go to conferences, join online communities. The more you learn about this world, the more opportunities you'll find.
So make connections. Learn from the people who are already doing this stuff.
Exactly. And remember what Santiago Barcon said. Choose roles where you can learn and make a difference. Don't be afraid to try new things, ask questions, challenge the way things are done.
It's not just about finding a job. It's about finding your purpose.
And that's what makes the energy sector so exciting right now. It's a chance to be a part of something huge, something that will change the world for the better.
Well said. So if we could leave our listener with just one thing to remember today, what would be?
The future of energy is electric. And that future is being built right now. If you want a career that matters, that has an impact, that's full of possibilities, this is it. The energy sector is calling. Time to plug in and power up your future.